So, what makes a great investor? Is it some kind of raw talent you're born with, a fancy degree, or is it just pure luck? Today, we're going to dive into the story of Vijay Kedia, a journey that really suggests the heart of an investor isn't born in a boardroom, it's forged in the fires of failure.
Our story kicks off with this quote. The it he's talking about? The stock market. Now, in his family, the market was the source of stress, a gamble you only talked about in whispers. But for him, it was just pure magic. And that one feeling, that little spark, is what set his entire life in motion. And this is where that magic started to take root. We're not talking about some high finance world here. We're talking about a regular business family. This contrast is so important because it tells you right away his fascination wasn't about the glamour. It was about the puzzle of the market itself.
Okay, so you've got this magical idea taking hold. But how does a dream like that actually start to become, well, real? Let's get into how this whole thing took shape in his early years.
Think about it. While everyone around him was seeing danger and risk, he was looking at the exact same thing and seeing this incredible giant puzzle. He was just captivated by it all, the logic, the psychology, the patterns in how people acted. Buying when they're excited, selling when they're scared. He was already thinking in a completely different way.
And this is the moment it all just clicks into place for him. At only 19 years old, he visits the Bombay Stock Exchange. I want you to just picture the scene. Total, overwhelming chaos. People shouting, just a blur of frantic motion. And yet right in the middle of all that madness, he felt this deep sense of calm, of purpose. He just knew this was his world.
But finding your world and actually conquering it, those are two very, very different things. His newfound purpose was about to slam head-on into the market's brutal reality.
This is the question that defines pretty much every big journey, isn't it? He had the passion, he had the fascination, he felt like he belonged. But here's the thing, the market doesn't care about your dreams. It only cares about discipline and knowledge, two things he hadn't earned yet.
And yeah, it didn't take long. He jumped in with very little money and even less of a plan. He made all the classic rookie mistakes, right? Chasing hot tips, making trades on a whim, having absolutely no clue about the companies he was buying. The fallout was immediate.
And this is that terrifying spiral that every single trader dreads. What started as these small, kind of manageable mistakes just started to snowball. The market wasn't cutting him any slack, and that initial buzz of the dream was getting replaced by the cold, hard math of a rapidly shrinking bank account.
Now, this is where the story shifts. It's not just about losing money anymore. It's about the emotional toll. The losses brought on this crippling self-doubt. People around him started mocking him, telling him to go get a real job. Suddenly, it wasn't just about his portfolio. It was about his entire identity, his whole dream being put on trial.
And here we are at the turning point. Humiliated, beaten down. He could have quit. Most people would have. But instead, he made the single most important decision of his entire career, which brings us to this next chapter, his transformation from a gambler into a true investor.
He didn't run away from the market. He ran straight to the library. He started just devouring everything he could get his hands on, company reports, business news, accounting books. He had this huge realization that passion wasn't going to be enough. He needed a deep, fundamental understanding of how businesses actually work.
And this slide right here, this is the light bulb moment. He'd been a trader, really a gambler, just reacting emotionally to every little price jump and drop. He needed to become an investor, someone who understands a business so deeply that they have the vision to watch it grow over years, not just days. So the whole game changed from chasing prices to understanding value.
This new philosophy, this new way of thinking, it wasn't just built from books and theory. No way. It was forged in the fire of his failures, built on painful lessons that would become his absolute greatest source of wisdom.
Just look at these truths. You can bet that each one of them was carved into his brain by a painful loss. He learned the hard way that you can't outsmart the market's timing. He learned that just waiting patiently with a good company is so much more powerful than frantic, so-called intelligent trading. And maybe most importantly, he totally reframed what failure meant. Losses weren't the end of the road. They were the tuition fee for his real education.
So after all that struggle, all the learning, all the painful losses, what was the real payoff? Well, the answer wasn't in his bank account. It was in the mindset that was finally being built.
This is the real payoff of those early years. The outcome wasn't some fat bank account. The outcome was internal.
He had built the mental toughness, the discipline, and the deep philosophical foundation of a true long-term investor. He had finally moved from just blind hope to informed belief.
I mean, this quote from the source just sums it all up perfectly, doesn't it? The first chapter of his story wasn't the victory lap. It was the grueling training montage. It was about surviving long enough to learn the real rules of the game and turning a dream that was once just a magical idea into a solid, workable philosophy.
And that brings us to the end of this explainer, with a question for you. Kedia's story really shows that our most valuable assets are often built not from our wins, but from how we survive and, more importantly, learn from our failures. That's a pretty powerful idea to think about, no matter what field you're in, not just investing.
What if I told you that the worst financial decision you could possibly make was actually the secret to your greatest success? Well, today, we're diving into the incredible story of an investor who lost it all, and then, from those very ashes, built a legendary strategy that people still study today. I mean, it's a question that kind of messes with your head, right? How can losing everything possibly be a good thing? Well, we're about to find out. We're going to look at how one absolutely devastating market crash became the bedrock for an investment philosophy that's still being talked about decades later. Okay, so every great comeback story needs a great collapse to start with, right? And for this story, we have to go back to the early 1990s. The Indian stock market back then, wow, it was less of an exchange and more like a wild casino. I'm talking about a place with insane volatility, where you could literally make a fortune or lose it all in the blink of an eye. And this quote just hits the nail on the head. It perfectly captures the absolute chaos of 1992. This was the era of the Harshad Mehta scam, a massive stock manipulation scheme that completely unraveled, and when it did, boom, confidence just vanished. The rules had to be rewritten, and thousands, I mean thousands, of regular people watched their life savings just disappear. The market wasn't just shaky anymore, it had become a total battlefield. So who was caught in all this crossfire? Well, one of those investors was a guy named Vijay Kedia. He jumped into the market full of hope, but this crash, it pushed him right to the edge. For him, this wasn't some abstract market correction you read about. No, this was a deeply personal catastrophe. And here's the thing. Kedia was trying to navigate this massive storm without a compass. He didn't really have a clear strategy. He was doing what a lot of people do, chasing hot stocks, listening to market tips. So when that crash finally hit, he wasn't just caught off guard. He was completely wiped out. All the money he'd spent years building up, gone. Just like that. Now, facing total ruin, let's be honest, most people would have just quit. They'd blame the system, they'd blame their bad luck, and they'd walk away forever. But this is where Vijay Kedia's story takes its most critical turn. Instead of giving up, he made a choice. A single choice that would completely redefine his entire future. And here it is. This was the mindset shift that changed absolutely everything. Instead of pointing fingers and blaming the market, he turned that magnifying glass right back on himself. He took 100% ownership of his failure. And he didn't just accept it. He decided he was going to dissect it, piece by painful piece. So he started with the most basic, most direct, and probably most painful question you can ask. No excuses, no trying to justify it, just a raw, honest look in the mirror, asking himself, why did I lose my money? That first question immediately led to another one, forcing him to really question his whole approach. Was I actually investing, or was I just gambling? Was he making calculated decisions, or was he just sitting at the casino betting on prices and hoping for a lucky break? And then came the next question, and this one marks his big transformation from a speculator to a true investor. Did I understand the business, or did I only understand its price? See, he realized that knowing a stock's price is the easy part, but understanding the actual business behind that price, that's where the real work is. That's where the real value is hiding. And finally, the last big question he had to face. Was I following actual knowledge, or was I just following noise? Was his strategy built on solid research, or was he just getting swept up in all the market gossip and following the herd? The brutally honest answers he gave himself to these questions, well, they became the bedrock of his entire new philosophy. Okay, so armed with this, brutal self-awareness, Kedia didn't just dip his toes back in the market, no way. He completely reinvented his approach. He stopped chasing all those popular, headline-grabbing stocks and instead began this quiet, meticulous hunt for what he called hidden champions. And the difference was just night and day. His old way? All impulse and noise, following gossip, chasing prices. But the new way? It was built on patience and deep, deep knowledge. He just threw out all his old habits and committed himself to this rigorous, research-first process. So what exactly was he looking for? Well, it wasn't the big, famous companies everyone was talking about. He was searching for these hidden champions. You know, small, kind of unloved companies that had 4 specific things going for them. 1, honest and hardworking leaders. 2, a really clear vision. 3, a massive potential market to grow into. And 4, a business model that could actually scale up. So after years of struggle, all that research and just quiet, grinding discipline, this new strategy finally took shape. It became a simple but really profound framework, and he gave it a name that perfectly captured its ultimate goal, the SMIL philosophy. So what the heck is SMILE? Basically, it's his personal checklist, his filter for finding those hidden gems. Every single letter stands for a core principle that a company absolutely has to have before he'd even think about putting a single rupee into it. All right, let's break it down. S is for small in size, because that gives the company huge room to grow. M is for medium in experience, so they're established but not old and stuck in their ways. I stands for large in ambition. They gotta be aiming high. L is for extra large market potential. And finally, and this is the most critical piece of the puzzle, E is for excellent management. But you know what? Finding these companies was only half the battle. The other half was the really, really hard part. It was something the market almost never rewards, just waiting. This new strategy of his required a level of patience that most people just don't have. It's like Kedia became a farmer, but his field was the stock market. He was planting these seeds, buying into businesses he truly believed in for the long, long haul, and he knew that the real fruit wouldn't appear overnight. He lived simply, even while other people were probably questioning his sanity, and he just stuck to the plan. And man, the path back was long and it was slow. After that 92 crash, the rest of the mid-90s were just this quiet period of rebuilding and deep research. In fact, it took almost a full decade for his strategy to really start showing results. A decade. But then, by the early 2000s, those first little green shoots started to appear. Suddenly, his small investments started to grow. First 2 times, then 5 times, then 10 times what he originally put in. And this wasn't some lucky lottery win. Not at all. This was the direct result of years and years of discipline, patience, and an absolutely unshakable belief in his process. And really, this is the biggest takeaway from his whole story. Kedia didn't look back at the crash of 92 as something that tried to destroy him. Instead, he saw it as his greatest teacher. That devastating loss, the one that almost ended his career for good, became the very thing that made it legendary. It forced him to learn the lessons that, in the end, would finally give him a reason to smile. Today, we're going to talk about an investor who is, well, a bit of a legend. His name is Vijay Kedia, and he built incredible wealth not by shouting the loudest, but by taking this quiet, almost meditative approach to the stock market. And that really brings us to the big question, doesn't it? How on earth did one guy find stocks that didn't just double or triple, but multiplied over 50 times in value? We're talking about spotting tiny, overlooked companies and just waiting as they turned into absolute giants. Seriously, how is that even possible? Just take a second and let that number really sink in. 50x. That's not a typo. But look, this wasn't some lucky lottery ticket. This wasn't a one-off trade. This was the direct result of a very deliberate, very patient, long-term strategy. So let's get into it. Let's look at the actual results of this unique philosophy. Where did these absolutely staggering returns even come from? Well, here are just a few of the names. Atul Auto, Cirrus Sanitary Ware, Repro India. Now, you have to understand, these were not the hot, flashy stocks everyone was tweeting about. Not at all. They were small, often ignored. Some people probably even laughed at them. But Kedia, he saw something that pretty much everyone else was missing. And this is the critical point, you guys. His success wasn't about some perfectly timed trade that he held for a week. No way. It was the result of deep research, incredible discipline, and the guts to wait, sometimes for an entire decade, for his ideas to actually pay off. But here's the thing. To really understand his investment strategy, you have to understand the man. His journey in the market was almost perfectly mirrored by this huge personal transformation. He went from being driven by fear to being driven by pure conviction. And this just lays it out perfectly. Look at the shift. That early career confusion, it was totally replaced by clarity. The fear that, let's be honest, paralyzes so many of us investors, it was replaced by this deep, unshakable patience. And that feeling of desperation, that need to find the next hot tip, gone, replaced by real conviction in his own homework. This is all just captured perfectly in this one killer quote. He was no longer searching for a formula, he had become the formula. See, his success wasn't about cracking some secret code or algorithm. It was about him, his character, becoming the living embodiment of smart, long-term investing. Okay, so what was the philosophy? How did he actually do it? Let's break down the core principles, because these are things that any of us can learn from. First up, this was one of his golden rules. He couldn't care less about the little daily blips and bleeps on a trading screen. He was all in on understanding the actual business behind the stock ticker. What do they actually do? Who's in charge? What's their real potential 5-10 years down the road? And this one, wow, this is such powerful advice, and it's so counterintuitive to everything we're told today. The goal isn't to hit one massive home run and retire. Nope. The goal is simply to survive the tough times and just stay in the game long enough for that magic of compounding to do its work. This really gets to the core of his thinking. He knew that numbers on a spreadsheet, they can be fudged, they can be manipulated, but the character, the integrity, the drive of a company's leadership, he believed that was the real, permanent sign of whether a company was going to win or lose. So really, it all boils down to this simple 4-step framework. You got to have the vision to see what others don't, the patience to wait for that vision to become reality, the discipline not to sell when things get scary, and finally, just plain old faith in the research you've done. So as his wealth just kept growing and growing, something really fascinating started to happen. Kedia's whole purpose began to shift, away from being just a private investor and toward becoming a public teacher, a mentor. He actually started to redefine what success even meant to him. It wasn't about the number of zeros in his bank account anymore. It was about the impact he could have on the next generation of investors just by sharing what he'd learned the hard way. And he did it with this incredible honesty. Instead of acting like some guru who never made a mistake, he openly talked about his failures, his bad calls. He gave people a real, grounded look at what it actually takes to make it in the market. So, let's wrap this up. Why is his simple, almost old-fashioned, character-driven approach still so powerful, especially today in our crazy, chaotic world? Well, Kedia's entire journey is proof that you don't need all the stuff people think you need. You don't need secret insider tips. You don't need to be a genius who can perfectly time the market. And you definitely don't need some complex PhD-level formula to get incredible returns. At the end of the day, in a world that's completely obsessed with algorithms and social media hype, his method just cuts through all that noise. It's powerful because it's human, it's logical, and it's absolutely timeless. And that really leaves us with one final thought to chew on. Vijay Kedia's story, it isn't just about stocks and money. It's a huge lesson in the quiet power of just being persistent. And it forces every single one of us to ask ourselves, in a world that screams for speed and instant results, what is our own patience actually worth?